a former nuclear negotiator, a former French nuclear negotiator, Jacques Audibert. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Good evening.
First off, how do you interpret the spin out of Tehran and the spin out of Washington?
But obviously, we are in a posturing phase which is not taking reality, especially into account. You see what the guy, Khamenei, just said has no link with reality. He said it's a big victory, whereas they have been defeated, humiliated. They said Israel almost collapsed. They said they slapped in the face of the United States. This doesn't make sense. On the other hand, the defense secretary is trying to explain everybody that it has been a full success. I'm not putting the two on the same level, but it's the same posturing phase. What we have to do now is to go as fast as possible into a real negotiation phase to try to resume what, to my mind, would be necessary now, which are real talks, getting to a kind of successor to the JCPOA.
To get to the successor of a JCPOA, what do you do if you're Iran? Do you sit down, as Trump claims? He says it might even be a meeting next week. Or do you try to rope in as many big players as possible, like was the case before 2015, when you had the countries like France and Germany?
I have negotiated with them for decades, so it's difficult for me to try to beat Iran. But look, for example, Arakchi, their foreign minister, who had contact with the three European Union former members of the 5+1 negotiating the JCPOA, they made contacts. This makes sense because Arakchi was my counterpart. He was a negotiator. You have to find a way to engage small talks on details, and then from there, progressively, you go more and more into concrete details to try to find something leading to an agreement. Because what has been done is, of course, an extraordinary, powerful military operation, probably successful. I have no doubt that the facilities have been severely damaged, but nobody can be sure today that the Iranians are not in a position to resume their enrichment program and to go closer to a real nuclear capability. We don't know, in weeks, in months, in years. Hopefully they have been delayed. I say hopefully because our goal has permanently been to avoid that the Iranians acquire this nuclear capability, which they were committed to, by the way, but we don't know. So negotiation is the only answer to the very important issue, which is making sure that the Iranians do not threaten Israel, do not threaten the non-proliferation regime with a nuclear capability.
Mr. Audibert, I have a question actually on Iran's suspension of cooperation with the UN nuclear agency, the IAEA. What impact does that have, and how important is it for Iran to cooperate with IAEA? Where will that lead if there are talks next week, if we don't have the IAEA on board?
It has always been part of their tactics to resume and to stop, to interrupt the cooperation with IAEA. Today, they have obvious reasons because their facilities are supposed to be obliterated. I can imagine that politically it's difficult for them, but is politically an accurate term talking about Iran when you see what the guide has said today, which is totally nonsense. So we don't know, but resuming cooperation with the IAEA would certainly be a good step forward. Maybe it's too early, but we have always used cooperation with IAEA as a very important tool, of course, to verify. And the JCPOA, which has been deleted by Mr. Trump in 2018, the JCPOA was a perfect vehicle, a perfect mean for the IAEA to access all these facilities. It was in the core of the agreement, which has been torn up.
What did you make when you heard Donald Trump saying at the closure of the NATO summit that maybe we don't need to negotiate anymore since we destroyed their nuclear program?
Well, it depends. The same day he said he wanted to negotiate. You cannot take for granted that all the nuclear Iranian capability have been destroyed. This is a simple vision of simple use of force. It's not the way to treat such a problem. On one hand, you can use the force. It has been done. We have negotiated for decades to avoid this situation. I met with my president or my minister many times, Prime Minister Netanyahu, convincing him that we were very tough with the Iranians. Sometimes we did. Obviously, when he saw arriving President Trump, he saw the opportunity to get rid of all these commitments, because everybody knows that it's under heavy pressure of Netanyahu that Trump decided to get out from this agreement in 2018. And now he comes to the conclusions he always wanted to come to. That's to say, use of force. But you cannot be sure that all their nuclear capability have been deleted. You know, you have some facilities which are very visible. To enrich uranium, you need huge facilities which can be seen, which can be bombed, as they have been last week. But as for the rest of the program, it can be done in much easy to hide facilities. It's in very narrow, very small places. You can do what they call the militarization of the program. So you can never be sure. I'm not saying that the Iranians are trustful negotiators. I'm saying that the diplomats know how to discuss with these kind of people, know how to progressively bring them towards something positive. Remember, when he was elected in 2013, President Rouhani's program was to get rid of the sanctions. I want to get rid of the sanction. He has been elected on this program. That's to say that our system worked. And unfortunately, it was not the position of President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
One last question, just to go back to the genesis of these 12 days of war, where we heard, by the way, the German Chancellor claiming that Israel was, quote, doing our dirty work with its operation. It was all based on this IAEA report, which was alarming. Yes, it's true that the Iranians were not cooperating to the full, but we've had analysts on who've told us that they didn't see that was that much new in the report that the IAEA put out. Was there really an imminent threat?
Obviously, when you take such a decision, you make a crisis meeting, around Prime Minister Netanyahu. Then you evaluate the risk. Iran was very weak, as we have seen with their retaliation of the previous strikes. So Iran is in a weak phase. They got rid of many of the proxies which are still and which were much more a big threat. But then, of course, nobody can deny that around this table you mention the political situation. Political situation for Prime Minister Netanyahu was that opposition to Gaza around the world was rising, but worse for him, opposition to what they are doing in Gaza was rising also within the Israeli population, making him at risk for the elections. Of course, you take this into account. They are politicians. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying common sense things. So I have no doubt that to get rid of this bad political situation because of Gaza was in the Prime Minister's mind when they took the decision, alongside with other parameters, of course. But as you just said, and as IAEA said as well, there was a threat. There was doubt about the cooperation of Iran, but there was no reason for an immediate threat.